What's up guys, this is Professor Pew Pew, and in today's video I want to share a build that I've been having a lot of fun on for the past few days. So for this build we run the Avalonian Glove, or the Fist of Avalon as it is officially called, Callum Purity, Fey Robe, any kind of sandals for mana sprint, and for the cape you can choose between Undead Cape or Avalonian Cape. I'm sure a lot of you guys have already seen a version of this build being played with the double-bladed staff, or even a ranged guiding weapon like Frost Staff or Bottom Bow, but I prefer this Avalonian Glove version a lot more than the other versions. I'm not saying the Avalonian Gloves are better than these other options, but I have more fun on the Avalonian Gloves because I like playing mobility melee weapons, and compared to the double-bladed staff, the Avalonian Gloves have some nice little perks like having a purge on E or a lot of burst damage, but also just because double-bladed staffs are everywhere and it's kind of lame to run the same thing that everybody else is running, and the Avalonian Gloves are much less used than double blades in the mists. The first time I ran into somebody else running this build, I was experimenting with a Forge Hammer build, and I had a lot of trouble fighting against it. So I thought I might want to try the build out and see if it's actually a good build or if it's just good against my experimental build. So I tried it out, and I think it's actually a pretty legit build and it's pretty fun to play. So that's why I'm making this video now. So the idea of this build is to play off of the different utilities from the Fey Robe. The Fey Robe lets you cycle and choose between 3 different abilities. The first one gives you a Ring of Fire, which fears people when they walk into it. Now, unlike the Firewall ability from the Fighter Staff, this fire ring only fears your target once. So if they walk into it, they'll take a lot more damage than walking into a firewall. But if they walk into it, they'll only get feared once, and then if they walk into it again, they'll be able to just walk through it. The second ability is a electric shield, which stuns people and does a tiny bit of damage to them when they hit you with direct damage. This works off of the Stalker Jacket ability, so this is what we use primarily against Stalker Jacket builds. And then the last one is the Ice Shard ability, which does a ton of damage. So it gives you 5 charges when you activate it, and each time you do direct damage to someone, you consume one of these charges to do extra damage to them and to also lower their maximum HP by 3%. So you get 5 charges, that means you actually lower their maximum HP by 15% if you hit all 5. So on the War Gloves, because a lot of your abilities are multi-hits, right? So like your Q, for example, has 2 parts to it. Your W, if you're using Devastating Combo, is 2 hits. If you're using Triple Kick, it's 3 hits. And then on the Ava Glove E, that's 2 hits if you land both parts, right? So because you have all these multi-hit abilities, you can proc your Face Scalp Rope 3 very easily and very quickly. So you can burst people with it really, really hard. In this video, I'm running 6.3 equivalent gear. I'm not fully spec'd out in the Ava Gloves. I have about 300, so I have Ava Gloves, Battle Bracers, and Spiked Gauntlet at 100, and everything else is like 60 to 70. So I'm not fully spec'd out, but with 6.3 gear, my full combo does roughly 2,500 to 2,700 damage, which is not quite enough to one-burst someone that is at my IP level, but against people that are less geared, it really just one-shots them. So the way you play this build kind of depends on what you're facing, but in the current meta, there are a lot of melee weapons that can outbrawl you. So against these weapons, such as Carving Sword, Death Givers, Battle Axe, those are the obvious ones, but even against something like a Great Hammer, you don't really want to just sit there and brawl with them. What you want to do instead is to tag them with your helmet first. And when your helmet is about halfway off cooldown, you go in, but you save your boots. Okay, so go in without using your boots. And you want to, hit your EW combo on them, do some damage, and then you want to disengage. And if you need to, like if they're gonna try to chase you as you're disengaging, you use your Ring of Fire skill to keep them off of you. If they pop boots to chase, maybe you need to pop boots to match your speed and run. But you basically just want to disengage, and then if you wait for your E to come completely off cooldown before you go in again, they will be out of combat and they'll be able to regen, right? This is why we need to wait for our helmet to come halfway off cooldown. That way, right before they're about to exit combat, you'll be able to tag them again with your helmet to keep them in combat so they cannot regen. And then on the second rotation, you go in and you use your Fey 3 skill to do the biggest burst you can do, and you just blow them up. Now, of course, that's in a ideal world where you land all of your skills. On War Gloves, because all of our abilities have these like really clunky animations, and our biggest ability, our E, has this really telegraphed jump that people can just blink out of or dash out of. Sometimes it's pretty challenging to land all of your skills. So if that happens, like if you miss your skills, it's okay. You just have to run for a reset, or you just have to run for maybe like instead of doing this in 2 rotations, maybe you have to run for a third rotation or a fourth rotation, or maybe you just have to completely run away and reset all of your cooldowns and try again. That's fine, but just when you're doing this, make sure that you're using only the first activation of your E, because if you use the second activation, then you get double cooldowns on your E. Right? That's the trade-off that we have to deal with for the Avalonian gloves. Is if you mess up your E, you get double cooldown. But if you're just on full retreat mode, just hit part 1 of your E and don't touch it part 2, and you'll still be like one of the most mobile weapons in the mists. And of course, you have your Ring of Fire skill. Drop that on a choke, and it's really good at preventing people from chasing you. This build is also really good against Fire Staffs. I know Fire Staffs can be annoying sometimes because they do so much damage, but for us it's very easy because we can jump across their firewalls with our E, and if they're on Fire Artillery, we can interrupt that with any of our weapon abilities and our helmet. So when you're playing against a Fire Staff that's your IP level, you want to do it like I did in this clip. So basically jump in, do a burst, run away, and then wait for a second burst. And then in between your bursts, you want to use your helmet to keep them in combat and prevent them from remounting. They don't have mobility, so they will not be able to get away from you, and you should be able to just get a second burst in for free. Another important thing to know is the damage on your E is applied after the purge. So, some skill interactions. If you're fighting against Hunter Hood, you can just punch into the Hunter Hood and it will purge the Hunter Hood off before you do damage, so you will not get reflected. Same thing with Cleric Robe. If the bubble is already on them, you can purge off the bubble before you do damage with them, so your E will actually hit for damage. And same thing with any kind of shielding mechanic like Knight Boots or Guardian Helmet, except for Brazilian Cape. Brazilian Cape, of course, has Purge immunity on it, so the damage will be absorbed by the bubble. This also matters when it comes to Undead Cape. Now, most of the times, if you're fighting against somebody that's your IP level, you should be able to finish them through Undead Cape if you use your E like right before they get into that Undead Cape range. But if you're fighting against somebody that has a lot of HP, let's say if they're running a Taproot or a Pyramid Snapper or both, or if they have more HP because they're overgeared, then you might not be able to finish them with your E. So in those cases, it would be better if you pop their cape first and then hit your E on them. That way, if they don't die to the damage from your E, they will still be revealed because of your purge. Alright, so these are a couple of nice satisfying little one-shots. The first one is against the Hunter Hood, and this is what I was talking about earlier with that purge mechanic. The purge hits before the damage, so we don't get reflected. And then the second one, this is actually against a tier 8 target, a tier 8 battle axe, 3000 HP. He gets 100 to 0'd. And same thing, he was running Inferno Shield, so the Inferno Shield is going to get purged before the damage hits, so the damage reduction doesn't get applied, and the reflect doesn't get applied either. Okay, so for this last one, I'm going to do a breakdown of my gameplay as I play this build in the Mist. That way you can get some understanding not just of the build, but also the mindset of this build in the Mist with the context of the Mist. So we're sitting at a Turbulent Mist and we're checking everybody's gear. And the one that's really worth killing here is going to be that 6-3 carving sword. It's the juiciest, right? So we want him dead. But we can't just start the fight on them, because then we'll definitely get ratted by the fire staff and the double blade. So ideally what we want to happen is we tag somebody else into combat with a laser and hope that the sword will dismount on us with the 15-second timer. But that didn't happen. I missed my laser. So I'm just going to pick up the orb and walk away with it and see what happens. And here I'm going to catch this double-bladed rat with my E and dismount him. And I'm hoping that the sword will dismount on screen range so he can get the 15-second timer. But he dismounted as soon as I got into combat off screen, so I have to back off. So he didn't get the timer and we have to back off. We just need to wait for our cooldown to come back so we can turn around on them. But you're going to see in a second that as we are backing off, another rat is going to show up and start hovering us. Right, so you saw me tag him into combat there with the helmet. If this rat didn't show up, then we can actually turn around right here because our helmet is halfway off cooldown, right? But too bad, we have another rat here, so I gotta deal with him first. He was hovering us to prevent us from running with our mobility skills, but actually we are perfectly fine with dismounting him right here because the sword is too far back, and if he does get dismounted here, we can just one-shot them with our full combo, because just by looking at him, we can tell he's kind of low gear, right? So we know that we can just delete him if we full combo him. He's messing around with us, and he's gonna regret that in a bit. The sword is mounted right now, right? So there's really no threat here, and I really want to just dismount here, or dismount this guy here. Okay, so the helmet is back, and it's gonna get dismounted. And of course, when we dismount him, when we get into combat, the sword is gonna back off and dismount, right? So I notice him backing off, and I know, like in game, I can hear the sound effect of a horse, right? So I know the sword is dismounted. Right, so I'm gonna back off and wait for a clean one burst on that bow. Alright, so now my E is coming off cooldown, right? I pre-proc my Fey robe so I can get that skill 3. And I wait until his boots are almost out to use my E so he can dodge it. Now we one burst him, and then the sword is coming in. So when he eats into range, we know there's going to be a W follow-up, right? So we just Q to the side to dodge that. And now we are pretty safe because we have more mobility than the sword, but we just need to make sure we use those mobility skills and we stay ahead of him and get some HP back, and then we can turn this around. Now, because the sword uses boots pretty early, I know it's going to be off cooldown soon, right? So I'm using up all my mobility skills to stay ahead. And I know he's going to be EWing me again, right? So we just wiggle to the side to dodge that W. And now my E is coming off cooldown, so I should be able to start this now. I can tag him into combat now with my helmet. Let that cooldown cook a little bit. And now we go back in, do some damage, and then back off right away. Drop the fire ring to keep our distance. Now we didn't actually know that he's gonna just eat into our fire ring like that, but even if he didn't, the point of the fire ring is just to keep him off of us, right? So that area there was good enough of a choke that it should have been able to keep him away from us. But because he did eat into our firewall, he's basically dead from that point, right? Because now we're full health, we can just run him down. And as soon as the E comes off of cooldown, we can just delete him. Like the video, sub to the channel, see you in the next one.